imagine you're a young woman
Okay.
in the 1970s
Yeah.
in Salt Lake City, and it's a place where, fitting in is really important. But you're kind of rebellious, tough as nails, and, you know, not afraid to speak your mind.
Yeah.
That was Kathy Jones Harmon. But one cold March night in 1976, she disappeared, and it left behind a mystery that still haunts the city today.
It's interesting because this case, it really does start so ordinary, you know? It
Yeah.
almost kind of, you get lulled into this sense of like, oh, this is a normal everyday thing, and
Yeah.
then it all unravels.
Yeah. And today we're going to dive into Kathy's story, looking at the events that led to her disappearance, the investigation, and the questions that linger almost 50 years later. And we have police reports, witness statements, news articles. So a lot to unpack.
It's a puzzle with a lot of pieces missing, which
Yeah.
is what makes it so intriguing, but also so frustrating.
Right. Well, let's start with March 2nd, 1976. Kathy is a 22-year-old newlywed, and she's out with her roommate Vicky at their local bar called Better Days. Just like you said, a typical Tuesday night.
And that bar becomes kind of a recurring theme in the case.
Okay.
You know, it's like this place of comfort, this place of familiarity, but also, as we'll see, maybe a place of conflict in Kathy's life.
Interesting. So Vicky goes home around 11 p.m.,
Yeah.
leaving Kathy to get a ride home from the bar owner, Van, after he closes. But when Van's done with the bar, Kathy's gone.
And he just assumed she got another ride home.
Right.
Which at first you think, oh, that's probably what happened. But then you realize she missed work the day before, too.
Yeah.
So now it's like, okay, something's a little off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she wasn't the type to skip out on work.
Yeah.
This wasn't a pattern for her.
Yeah.
And so Vicky checks their apartment the next morning
Okay.
and finds Kathy's purse and even her own coat that she had left with Kathy the night before. So it seems like she made it home that night but then left again.
Exactly. And it's like, that's where it gets murky.
Yeah.
Like, did something happen at the apartment? Did she leave on her own afterwards? And it just adds to the mystery.
So by Wednesday evening, Kathy's family is worried. Understandably so. They haven't heard from her. She's now missed 2 days of work.
Right.
They contact Salt Lake City police to report her missing.
And so the police start investigating, talking to Vicky, looking around the neighborhood. And this is where we start to get those really interesting details from Kathy's neighbors.
Right, like the one neighbor that mentions hearing an argument coming from her apartment on either Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
They couldn't pinpoint the exact day, which again adds to that uncertainty.
And it makes you wonder, like, okay, was this a domestic dispute?
Right.
Is this connected? We don't know.
Yeah. And then there's the neighbor who lived above Kathy,
Right.
who reported hearing moaning coming from her apartment on Tuesday night.
Which is creepy.
Yeah.
It really suggests that something maybe really bad happened.
Right. It makes you think, was there someone she encountered at the bar?
Exactly.
She followed her home.
Yeah, like maybe that place of comfort, that place of familiarity was also what made her vulnerable.
And to add to the tension, Kathy's husband, Dave, who is a long-haul trucker,
Okay.
rushes back to Salt Lake City on March 5th.
Oh, wow. So he's out on the road when all this is happening?
Yeah.
That must have been agonizing to
Right.
be so far away and not know what's going on.
And then comes a huge turning point in the case. On March 6th, a hiker stumbles upon a woman's body in the snow outside Salt Lake City.
And this discovery just transforms the case completely. You go from a missing person to a homicide,
You're right.
and everything takes on a new level of urgency.
And it's so sad. The victim is identified as Kathy. Her body is partially clothed. There are signs of a struggle and drag marks leading to the site.
So it really does seem like a brutal attack,
Yeah.
possibly transported out to this more remote location.
And there's only one set of footprints at the scene leading to and from the body.
So was the killer acting alone? Was the scene staged to mislead investigators? So many questions.
Right. The autopsy confirms the cause of death is strangulation. But because of the location of Kathy's body, the investigation now falls under the jurisdiction of the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office.
So another layer of complication to an already complicated case.
Right.
You got different agencies, different procedures. Did that hinder the investigation?
Right.
We don't know.
Yeah. So the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office takes over and starts focusing on potential suspects. And Dave, who is now cleared because he was out of town, actually gives them some pretty interesting leads. He mentions a woman who threatened Kathy months earlier at the Sundowners Motorcycle Club, where Dave was the president.
So now we have this whole motorcycle club connection,
Right.
biker gangs, possible rivalries, maybe retaliation.
Yeah.
Could that have something to do with it?
And then he mentions another altercation Kathy had with a different woman at Better Days Bar.
Oh, wow. So the bar comes up again.
Yeah, just 3 weeks before her disappearance.
Like, is there something more to this bar? Like, was there a darker side to Kathy's life than what we initially thought?
But here's what really bothers me. There's no indication that investigators ever followed up on these leads about the women that Dave mentioned. Why weren't those women investigated further?
Yeah, were they so focused on finding a male perpetrator that they just dismissed these women as suspects?
Right, and then the case takes another unexpected turn just days after Kathy's body is found.
Okay.
Salt Lake City is shaken by another murder.
Oh, no.
This time, it's a 24-year-old woman named Carolyn Sarkeesian.
So now you have the timing and the brutality of this second murder.
Right.
And it's natural for people to start speculating, are these connected?
Right. Could there be a serial killer at work in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, it's a chilling thought.
Yeah, it's scary. And they're both young women, both strangled, both found in kind of desolate locations.
And the investigators do look into a possible connection.
Okay.
They follow a lead about Kathy's relationship with a man we'll call JM,
Okay.
but he's quickly ruled out.
And that quick dismissal makes you wonder, how thoroughly did they really look at him?
Yeah, was his alibi really airtight, or were they just too quick to move on? It does make you wonder, like, was there pressure to just solve the case, or were they just not willing to dig too deep into certain parts of Kathy's life?
And even with all these leads, the case goes cold for decades.
Right.
It isn't until 2004, almost 30 years later, that a DNA hit in Carolyn Sarkeesian's case leads to the arrest of a man named Gail Benvidas.
So that must have been a big moment, right?
Yeah.
It gave everyone hope that maybe they could find some answers about Kathy's murder, too.
Right. Could this be the same guy?
Exactly. The families of both victims, I mean, you can imagine that mix of anticipation and anxiety,
Right.
waiting to see if there's a connection.
But DNA testing seemingly ruled out any connection between Benvidas and Kathy's case.
So another dead end.
Yeah, devastating blow to anyone hoping for answers.
It's heartbreaking, right?
Yeah.
To be so close and then have it ripped away.
But then in 2009, a woman comes forward with a tip.
Okay.
She says her then-boyfriend came home in 1976 with scratches on his face, and he claimed his sister had caused them.
So this is a totally random tip, but it kind of lines up, right?
Right.
Same year. And those scratches indicate maybe there was some kind of a struggle.
Yeah, but it gets even more strange. A week later, the boyfriend allegedly confesses to her,
Wow.
saying that he and a friend picked up a girl at a party,
Yeah.
took her to Immigration Canyon, had sex with her, left her there, and later learned that she'd been found dead.
Wow. That confession is pretty damning.
Right.
I mean, it matches up with the location, the possible sexual assault.
Right.
It's huge.
But there's a problem.
Hmm.
The tip says there were 2 people involved,
Right.
but all the evidence of the crime scene points to just one person.
So could this be a false confession?
Yeah.
What, was he trying to minimize his role, maybe blame his friend?
Right. So even with this confession, detectives get DNA samples from both the ex-husband and his friend.
Okay.
But here's the thing. The outcome of the DNA testing is unclear.
So frustrating. You
Yeah.
get this close, and then they don't tell us what happened.
Yeah. Did the tests rule them out?
Yeah.
Were they inconclusive? We don't know.
Right. Like, you need that information to know if this is a real breakthrough or just another dead end.
And Detective Pender, who's still working on the case, mentions some problems with private labs and the challenge of separating mixed DNA samples.
Which, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah.
DNA technology has come a long way,
Right.
but it's not perfect, and trying to extract DNA that's old or mixed with other samples is really hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just not possible.
So even with this big tip and the DNA evidence, we're basically back where we started.
It's almost like we took one step forward and 2 steps back.
Yeah. What were the results of those tests? Why is everyone being so secretive about what happened?
It's like hitting a brick wall just when you thought you're about to break through.
Exactly. So now we're caught up to the present day with the investigation.
Okay.
And despite decades of setbacks, Detective Pender is still optimistic about solving Kathy's case.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
After all these years, he hasn't given up hope.
Right. And he says it's because of the advancements in DNA technology.
And he's right.
Oh.
Investigative genetic genealogy has really changed how we look at cold cases.
Right.
It's helped solve so many cases that seemed impossible.
Exactly. And Detective Pender has also asked for anyone with any information to come forward, no matter how small.
That's so important.
Yeah.
You never know what detail might be the missing piece.
It's like that saying the truth is out there.
Yeah.
And it might be something that someone thinks is completely insignificant,
Right.
but could be the key for Detective Pender.
Exactly. Sometimes it just takes that one little thing to trigger a memory or lead to another clue.
Yeah. And this is where you, our listeners, come in.
Yes.
Think back to 1976.
Yeah.
Were you in Salt Lake City back then?
Did you know Kathy?
Did you know anyone connected to the case? Even if you think it's not important.
Yeah. Any little detail could be what Detective Pender needs.
It's a reminder that even in the most normal places, bad things can happen.
And for Kathy's family, they've never had any closure. They've been living with this pain and uncertainty for almost 50 years.
So as we finish up our deep dive into Kathy's case, we want to leave you with some of the questions that still need answers.
Yeah, because they deserve answers.
Right.
Not just for Kathy's family, but for everyone.
Exactly. And these aren't just questions for us to think about,
Right.
but for all of you listening too.
Maybe you have some information or insight that could help shed light on this.
Yeah. So first, what really happened with those leads about the women Dave mentioned? Did investigators really look into them? Was there a reason why they were dismissed so quickly, other than just assuming it had to be a man?
Yeah, like was it a mistake, a bad judgment call, or was there something else going on?
Right. And what about JM, the man Kathy was involved with? Was his alibi really checked out? Is there more to his story than we know?
Yeah, and they ruled him out so fast.
Right.
Even with those reports of arguments and the moaning coming from her apartment, it just seems odd.
Yeah. And then there's the tip about the ex-husband and his friend.
Yeah.
What did the DNA tests actually show? Why are they being so secretive about the results?
It's like they're holding back crucial information.
Exactly.
And we need that information to understand what really happened.
So these are just some of the many unanswered questions in this really sad and confusing case.
But maybe with your help, some of these mysteries can finally be solved.
Yeah.
Someone out there might have that missing piece,
Right.
and it could be you. And it could be something that someone thinks is totally unimportant.
Exactly.
But it's actually the key to unlocking everything.
And as we've seen in this deep dive, sometimes the smallest detail can really be the key to solving a mystery.
That's right. Sometimes one little piece of information can lead to something much bigger. Like a domino effect, you know?
Yeah,
You
fair.
tip over that first domino and then boom, the whole thing comes crashing down.
So if you remember anything at all from tonight, even if it seems random or you're not sure if it's important, please contact Unified Police Detective Ben Pender.
His number is 385-468-99816.
And if this case has made you curious about genetic genealogy, maybe think about uploading your DNA profile to a site like GE Match or Family Tree DNA.
Yeah, and make sure you choose to share your info with law enforcement.
Right, because you might have the missing piece to solving not just Kathy's case, but tons of others.
It's an easy way to, actually help make a difference.
So let Kathy's story remind us to pay attention, to be aware, and never give up hope.
Yeah.
And to remember that even the most normal everyday places can have dark secrets.
And remember, we can all do our part to help solve these cases
Right.
by talking to each other, by supporting the police, by staying involved.
We can make sure that stories like Kathy's don't stay mysteries forever.
Exactly. Keep those conversations going.
Well, that's our deep dive into the unsolved case of Kathy Jones Harmon. We hope you found it interesting.
Yeah.
If you did, please subscribe to the deep dive for more stories like this.
We'll keep bringing the cases that keep us up at night.
Until next time, stay curious, everyone.
And be kind.